Welcome to Constructive Talks, and we speak forward. In this deep conversation, the speakers wrestle with one of the biggest questions people inherit without realizing it. Who taught us where to look for peace, freedom, truth, and heaven? What began as a conversation about heaven becomes a deeper examination of family, religion, power, property, survival, conditioning, community, and the way people are trained to accept pressure as normal life. This episode is honest, reflective, challenging, and emotionally layered. It is not about forcing agreement. It is about telling the truth long enough for something deeper to surface. Today, we dive into a question many never ask.
And that is exactly why people get nervous. Because a lot of systems survive by never being questioned all the way through. They do not mind shallow questions. They do not mind a little frustration. They do not even mind people complaining as long as nobody follows the logic to the end. But once you start asking who benefited from this belief, who benefited from this structure, who benefited from me calling this normal, now you are not just being spiritual. Now you are becoming dangerous to the comfort of people who built whole lives on your obedience.
I want to begin by saying something carefully. I do believe people have had genuine spiritual experiences. I do believe people have felt close to God, close to peace, close to something bigger than themselves. So I do not want this conversation to sound like we are mocking people's faith or making everybody who believes in God sound foolish. That is not fair, and it is not true. But I also think it is fair to ask how people's longing for peace got shaped by people in power. Those are two different conversations, but they touch each other.
That distinction matters. Because wonder is not the same as control. Reverence is not the same as institution. The human need to explain life is not the same thing as the organized use of belief to regulate behavior. People saw the sky, storms, death, birth, hunger, fire, the sun rising every day, and they tried to make meaning. That makes sense. What we have to separate is the early human search for meaning from the later social use of meaning as management.
That right there is the opening. Because I think a lot of people are afraid that if they question religion as control, they are also rejecting mystery, rejecting beauty, rejecting God. And some of them are not doing that. Some people are saying, no, I'm trying to strip away what was added by power so I can get closer to what is true.
Exactly. Because if somebody tells you heaven is above you, way out there, and peace is later, and justice is later, and reward is later, but suffering is now, obedience is now, labor is now, silence is now, guess who that setup helps? It sure does not help the person sweating, bleeding, grieving, or paying. It helps the one who needs you to tolerate the current arrangement.
That is true, but I also think we have to be careful with how we say it. Some oppressed people did not have the luxury of deep philosophy. They just wanted to survive the day. They wanted to believe the pain was not all there was. They wanted to believe the story was bigger than the whip, bigger than the field, bigger than the hunger, bigger than the grief. So yes, belief can be manipulated, but sometimes belief also keeps a person from collapsing under pressure.
That is why this conversation has to hold both truths: faith as refuge, religion as control, hope as survival, doctrine as management. They can exist in the same history at the same time.
I want to go right to the core question. Why did it become so easy for people to think heaven is above? Why not around? Why not within? Why not between us? Why not in how we live, how we love, how we build, how we protect? Why did it become so easy to imagine peace as somewhere else?
Because if I keep you looking somewhere else, you do not challenge what is right in front of you. That is it. That is not complicated. If your eyes are always trained upward for rescue, you may never turn around and identify the system that profits from your exhaustion. You may call your chains discipline. You may call your fear respect. You may call your silence wisdom. You may call your deprivation character building. And the whole time somebody is feeding off your labor.
You are not wrong. But the reason I keep slowing us down is because people do not only believe what benefits the powerful, they also believe what helps them bear what they do not yet know how to change. Some people were not looking up because they were foolish. Some were looking up because everything around them had become unbearable.
That is a critical correction. Not every inherited belief begins with manipulation in the individual life. Sometimes it begins with pain. Sometimes a person receives a belief as comfort first, and only later do we see how that comfort also kept certain systems in place. That does not make the hurting person weak. It means human beings search for meaning when they are under pressure.
I think where this gets personal is when we stop talking only about history and start talking about right now. Because people still do this, not just with religion, with money, with success, with status, with professionalism, with nationalism, with family rules, with respectability. We still teach people to delay themselves. We still teach people that peace comes later if they obey long enough.
That is why money became a god. And I know some people flinch when they hear that, but it is true. Money decides where you live, what food you eat, whether you can rest, whether you get medical care, how people treat you, whether you are considered capable, whether your child goes to a decent school, whether your emergency becomes a catastrophe. So when people say, no, people worship money, I say, of course they do. Society trained them to see money as access to dignity.
Not even just dignity, relief, breathing room, safety, a little quiet. A lot of people are not chasing wealth because they are greedy. They are chasing relief because they are tired.
That is important because we flatten people too much. We act like everybody who wants money wants power over other people. A lot of working people do not want domination. They want options. They want to stop being trapped by every bill, every emergency, every policy, every illness, every car repair, every rent increase. They want room to think.
Wow, that line was powerful. They want room to think. Because what if that is part of the design? Keep people so pressed that they never have time for deep questions. Keep them surviving so hard they cannot investigate what they inherited.
That is exactly part of the design. Exhausted people are easier to govern. Confused people are easier to direct. Financially pressured people are easier to control. Emotionally underdeveloped people are easier to manipulate. And families that never learned how to talk deeply will repeat anything that feels familiar.
Let me put something on the table, though. Some of what we call control today started as order in people's minds. I am not defending harmful systems. I am saying some people really believed rules were keeping life together. Some elders were not trying to crush imagination. They were trying to hold a fragile family together with what they had.
Yes, but fragile order can still cause harm. Survival logic can still wound children. Good intentions do not erase impact. A grandmother saying do not question adults may think she is protecting the child from danger, but she may also be training that child to ignore their own internal warning system.
That is one of the deepest parts of this conversation. What did we normalize because it helped somebody survive, even if it cost somebody else their voice? That question reaches family, religion, school, community, business, all of it.
And that is why I get impatient, because too many people want to discuss systems like they floated down from the sky by themselves. No. Somebody built them. Somebody enforced them. Somebody benefited. Somebody kept them alive. Somebody knew exactly what silence was worth. And I am tired of every conversation getting soft right when accountability walks in the room.
I hear you. I do. But accountability without understanding can turn into performance. People start naming villains and never ask why regular people participated. That matters too, because whole communities can be conditioned into carrying out a system they did not create, and then the damage keeps moving through ordinary households.
That is so true. Systems do not survive only because a few powerful people exist. They survive because ordinary people learn to perform them on smaller scales. Parent to child, pastor to member, teacher to student, manager to employee, husband to wife, group to outsider, family to truth tellers. That is how a large system enters daily life.
Let's sit there for a moment. Because when we talk about patriarchy, control, domination, some people hear only men. But we are really talking about a pattern too, a structure, a way of arranging human value, a way of assigning who gets to decide, who gets to question, who gets heard, who gets corrected, who gets believed, who gets protected, who gets punished.
Exactly. Patriarchy is not just a male body. It is a mindset that says power should sit above, flow downward, and remain unquestioned. It is a structure that turns hierarchy into morality. And once you have that, everything else gets easier to justify.
And once families accept that, children feel it before they can name it. who gets grace and who gets consequences, who gets listened to and who gets dismissed, who can be expressive and who is told they are doing too much, who gets to be complicated and who is expected to be easy.
This is why I say heaven beside us is not just a mystical sentence. It is a social challenge. If heaven means dignity, peace, truth, emotional safety, belonging, and room to be human, then we have to ask why so many homes teach the opposite.
Let me ask each of you something personal. When did you first realize what you were taught to call normal was not healthy?
For me, it was in my 20s. I had started working full-time, trying to build something, trying to be what people call responsible. And I noticed that every good man around me looked emotionally constipated. They could pay bills, they could show up to work, they could give advice, but they could not name their pain. They could not apologize cleanly. They could not sit in vulnerability without turning it into anger or distance. And I realized, wait a minute, this is what we called strength. This inability to feel without shame, that was a turning point for me. I said, no, something is wrong with what we inherited.
Mine was earlier, but I did not fully understand it until later. I used to notice that adults would say children are a blessing, but then the children were treated like interruptions. Be quiet, go sit down, stay out of grown folks' business, stop crying, stop asking, stop moving, stop feeling. Now I understand children do need structure, but there was something underneath it. We loved them, yes, but often without curiosity, without listening, without making room for their inner world. I knew something was off because so many children were obedient on the outside and lonely on the inside.
I also experienced this in education. I was a good student, and because I was a good student, adults assumed I was okay. That taught me a lot. It taught me society confuses performance with wellness. If you can produce, they leave you alone. If you can function, they assume you are fine. If your pain comes out in a polished way, people call you resilient. But inside, I was carrying confusion, anger, abandonment, pressure, and a whole lot of questions nobody asked me about. That is when I realized the system does not necessarily want whole people. It wants manageable people.
Language was another area. The older I got, the more I realized there were whole categories of human experience we had no healthy language for. We had language for obedience, language for sin, language for duty, language for shame, language for success, but not enough language for emotional neglect, not enough language for inherited fear, not enough language for surviving in a house that never hit you but never really saw you, not enough language for being spiritually active and emotionally disconnected. Once I saw the language gap, I could not unsee it.
And that is why people stay stuck. If you cannot name it, it keeps pretending to be normal.
Yes, but naming it can also feel like betrayal to some people. Because once you name the harm, now you have to admit the people who raised you were limited. You may still love them deeply, but you cannot protect the story and tell the truth at the same time.
That is one of the hardest emotional thresholds in adult life. Understanding that love and limitation can exist in the same person. Understanding that care and control can live in the same household. Understanding that tradition and harm can travel together.
That right there is what makes people defensive. Because they think, if I question what I was given, I am dishonoring the people who gave it to me. But what if telling the truth is the honor? What if breaking the harmful cycle is the respect we seek?
I agree with that, because too many people use gratitude to keep accountability out of the room. They did the best they could, okay? And the best they could still shape me in ways I had to fight my way out of. Both can be true. They can have struggled and still pass down harmful thinking.
I do not disagree. I just want us to keep tenderness in it, because some people have weaponized truth too. They use modern language to humiliate older generations rather than understand context. I think truth without compassion can become another form of domination.
Compassion without truth becomes permission. So we need both.
That is the balance. Truth without compassion becomes harm. Compassion without truth becomes an excuse. And a lot of families swing too far in one direction.
Let me say something that may bother some people. A lot of what people call peace is not peace. It is quiet. It is suppression. It is everybody performing to avoid eruption. That is not peace. That is tension managed through silence.
That is true. A quiet house is not always a healthy house.
A respectful workplace is not always a safe workplace either.
And a religious environment is not always a spiritually free environment.
Exactly. Sometimes the smoothest room is the most controlled room.
And sometimes the loudest truth teller is carrying pain the room never made space for.
Which is why behavior has to be read with depth. The child acting out, the employee withdrawing, the spouse shutting down, the teenager arguing, the community member calling things out harshly. Sometimes that is not rebellion for rebellion's sake. Sometimes that is pressure finding a crack.
Let's go back to the history thread for a minute. We were talking about how people once roamed, lived closer to land, closer to cycles, closer to direct survival. Then over time, the world gets cut up. Property lines, city limits, taxes, ownership, documents, permission, regulation, fences. We call it civilization. But there is also loss in that story.
A lot of loss. We turned existence into administration. We made life something you have to constantly prove your right to participate in. You need papers for this, payment for that, approval for this, compliance for that. And people call that order, but order for who? Convenience for who? Stability for who? Usually for the people already positioned above the structure.
There is truth there, but let me say this too. Some order does protect people. Some regulation keeps greedy people from doing even more damage. So I do not want the conversation to drift into pretending every structure is evil just because it is structure.
Right? The question is not structure or no structure. The question is humane structure or dehumanizing structure, protective boundaries or exploitative control, community responsibility or hierarchy for its own sake.
That is a good distinction. Because some people hear critiques like this and think the answer is chaos. No, the answer is not chaos. The answer is systems built around human dignity instead of human extraction.
Yes, but let's not pretend extraction is accidental. A lot of modern life is built on it. Work people to the edge, keep them aspiring, sell them comfort, call it success, then blame them for being tired. That is the system.
And people bring that same mentality into families. Work, perform, provide, obey, keep the image, and never slow down long enough to ask whether the house feels humane.
That is why so many people were materially housed, but emotionally homeless.
Please say that again.
So many people were materially housed, but emotionally homeless. They had an address, but no place to land internally. They had adults around them, but no safe witness. They had rules, but no understanding. They had religion, but no emotional literacy. They had food sometimes, but not always warmth. That kind of homelessness does not show up on paper the same way, but it shapes a person deeply.
That is very real. I have known people whose greatest wound was not one dramatic event. It was the daily absence of being emotionally held.
And because nothing big happened, people tell themselves it was fine. That is another problem. We have a very broken standard for harm. If nobody hit you, starved you, or abandoned you physically, people act like you have no right to question what shaped you. That is nonsense. Neglect, control, chronic dismissal, emotional invisibility, those things shape a life.
They do. And when people have no language for that, they often reach for something else to explain their restlessness. They call themselves difficult, ungrateful, too sensitive, hard to please, spiritually weak. They personalize what may actually be structural and relational.
Which is exactly why conversations like this matter. Because sometimes the mind cannot evolve until it meets language that fits the experience.
That is beautiful and true. Sometimes people do not need another instruction. They need a sentence that finally tells the truth about what they lived.
And once they have that sentence, they start upsetting people.
Because clarity is disruptive.
Very disruptive. People like you are better off confused. They like you easier to manage. As long as you're grateful, quiet, hardworking, and a little uncertain, everybody feels safe. But once you say, no, this was harmful. No, this standard is dishonest. No, I will not keep performing peace while I'm suffocating. Now suddenly you are the problem.
That part is so real, especially in communities that survive through silence. The person who speaks is often treated like the threat, rather than the pattern they are naming.
Because silence protects systems. It also protects people's identities. If I have built my whole self-image around being respectable, righteous, sacrificial, strong, or successful, and your truth complicates that, I may resist your truth to protect my identity.
That is a powerful sentence. People do not only defend systems, they defend the self they built inside the system.
And that self may have cost them a lot. So when you challenge it, they feel like you are dismissing their whole life.
Which is why timing and tone matter, even when truth is necessary. Some people can hear truth only if they feel their humanity is still being recognized.
Yes, but I also want to say this. Sometimes the demand for a soft tone is another delay tactic. Some truths will never sound comfortable to the people benefiting from the lie.
There it is. That is one of the tensions in rebuilding. How do you tell the truth clearly without letting tone become the excuse for why the truth does not have to be answered?
Sometimes you just tell it, respectfully if possible, directly when necessary. But you tell it. I am tired of oppressed people being required to package truth like a gift for the people who ignored their pain.
I agree with the core of that. I just think we have to know what the goal is. If the goal is release, one approach. If the goal is rebuilding, sometimes another approach. Not softer in truth, but maybe wiser in delivery.
That is fair. Strategy matters. But there also has to be room for the voice of the person who is simply done. Not everybody is at the stage of neat delivery. Some are just now getting their voice back.
I want each of us to answer this plainly. What do you think people have been taught to confuse with heaven? Comfort, status, escape, delayed reward, compliance. They confuse heaven with the promise that one day all this pressure will finally make sense. But if I'm honest, a lot of people are enduring systems they should be interrogating, hoping endurance itself will somehow turn into peace. That is not heaven. That is conditioning.
I think people confuse heaven with relief from pain, which makes sense. If you have known deep grief, deep labor, deep fear, deep instability, heaven may first show up in your imagination as rest. No fighting, no hunger, no worry, no shame, just rest. I understand that. But I also think some people have been taught to wait for rest rather than create more humane lives here.
I think people confuse heaven with distance from responsibility. They imagine a place or state where all the hard work of becoming more honest, more accountable, more emotionally clear disappears. But if heaven is also about truth, then some of the work begins now. Not perfection, but participation in building a more humane life now.
I think people confuse heaven with whatever their pain told them they were missing most. If they lacked safety, heaven becomes safety. If they lacked affection, heaven becomes unconditional love. If they lacked dignity, heaven becomes recognition. If they lacked freedom, heaven becomes release. And none of that is wrong, but we have to ask whether people were trained to imagine those things only somewhere else, because giving them more of it here would threaten somebody's control.
Yes, that is it. Because imagine if people stopped tolerating family structures, workplaces, religious spaces, and social systems that keep peace scarce on purpose. Imagine if people said, no, enough. If heaven means dignity, then I need more dignity in my daily life right now. That would change a lot.
It would, but it would also require people to outgrow some very deep fear. Because many people have been taught that peace is selfish, boundaries are rebellion, questioning is disrespect, and emotional honesty is disorder.
And when you are taught that, you can spend decades policing yourself on behalf of a system that never loved you properly.
That is the sentence. You can spend decades policing yourself on behalf of a system that never loved you properly. That applies to homes, communities, jobs, institutions, relationships, all of it.
When you finally realize it, you get angry. Let's say that too. People talk like mental evolution is calm all the time. No. Sometimes it starts with anger, honest anger, grief-filled anger, the kind of anger that says I lost years to this, I called this normal, I blamed myself inside a crooked structure, I bent myself into shapes I did not need to be in. Sometimes anger is the first clean sign that confusion is breaking. I agree, as long as anger is not where you live forever. Anger can open the door, but it cannot build the home.
That is beautifully said.
Let's bring in community. Because once people start seeing differently, the question becomes, what now? If heaven is beside us, if peace is not only later, if dignity should not be postponed, what changes in community?
We stop protecting image more than people. That is first. Too many communities care more about appearing stable than being humane. Too many churches care more about reputation than truth. Too many families care more about respect than emotional safety. Too many businesses care more about productivity than people. If we are serious, we stop protecting image more than people.
I would add listening, real listening, not waiting to correct, not listening to reply, listening to understand what is actually being said and what pain is underneath it. Communities have become too quick to judge behavior and too slow to ask what produced it.
Not just formal education, emotional education, language education, historical education. Children need words earlier. Adults need better words too. If people only have the language of obedience and punishment, then every problem gets interpreted through those categories.
That is why so many people struggle to talk across differences. They were not given enough humane language. Everything becomes an attack or defense. Very little becomes inquiry.
And inquiry is threatening to rigid systems, because inquiry opens the door to alternative explanations. What if the difficult child was carrying grief? What if the rebellious woman was telling the truth? What if the ungrateful employee was exhausted under dishonest leadership? What if the lost young man was never emotionally guided? What if the too sensitive person was the only one actually feeling the damage in the room?
Sometimes, the most sensitive person is carrying the truest signal.
Absolutely. Sensitivity is not always weakness. Sometimes it is perception refusing to go numb.
I feel like this is where the conversation turns. Because now we are not just critiquing heaven above, we are asking what it would look like to build more heaven beside us. More truth, more dignity, more emotional safety, more shared humanity.
Then we need standards, real ones, not inspirational slogans. Standards for family, standards for leadership, standards for community, standards for what is not acceptable anymore. And I will say it plainly. Some patterns have had enough grace. Some patterns have had enough explanation. Some things need confrontation now. That is enough.
Please, give us an example.
No problem. Adults using respect to mean children cannot question them. That is enough. Leaders using professionalism to mean people cannot be fully human. That is enough. Religious spaces using order to avoid hard truths. That is enough. Families using that is just how they are to excuse ongoing emotional harm. That is enough. Communities praising endurance while ignoring what people are enduring. That is enough.
I agree. And I would add another. People saying they want better communities while refusing the discomfort of more honest conversations. That is enough too. Rebuilding is not a slogan. It is relational labor.
I do not disagree, but I want to add grace for the people who are waking up late. Some people are just now getting the language, just now seeing clearly, just now recognizing what they inherited. They may move clumsily at first.
That matters. Not everybody arrives at clarity in the same decade of life.
I saw emotionally constipated men who couldn't express pain or vulnerability, mistaken for strength.
I noticed children treated like interruptions, loved but not truly listened to or seen.
I realized performance was mistaken for wellness. Inside, many carried deep confusion and pain.
I saw a language gap with no words for emotional neglect or inherited fear, only for obedience and shame.
Without language, harm stays invisible and unchallenged.
But naming harm can feel like betraying loved ones who did their best with limits.
Love and limitation coexist. Care and control can live side by side.
Telling the truth can be the greatest honor to those who raised us.
Gratitude should not block accountability. The best they could still shaped us.
Truth without compassion can become domination. Compassion without truth becomes excuse.
We need both for healing.
Much of what people call peace is actually quiet compliance masking tension.
A quiet house is not always a healthy house.
A respectful environment is not always safe.
True, but late awakening cannot become another excuse for no accountability. Learn, yes, grow, yes, but do not keep injuring people while calling your slowness a process.
That is fair. Growth must be visible in behavior, not just vocabulary.
Yes, you cannot just learn new words and keep old habits.
Let's make this practical. What does embracing the fact that heaven beside us look like in everyday life?
In family, it looks like children being allowed to ask why without being treated like enemies. It looks like adults apologizing when they are wrong. It looks like a home having rules and warmth. It looks like correction that does not humiliate. It looks like people being able to bring their full questions into the room.
In leadership, it looks like not building organizations on silent suffering. It looks like clear expectations, humane communication, fair treatment, real development, and accountability that applies upward too, not just downward. Leaders need to stop acting like the people carrying the mission are machines.
In community, it looks like not waiting for crisis before people matter. It looks like mentorship that is consistent, not performative. It looks like elders listening as much as they advise. It looks like programs that teach people how to think, communicate, research, reflect, and build. It looks like making truth part of the culture, not an emergency response.
For the individual, I think it looks like learning to notice what you were taught to call normal, not with shame, but with honesty. What relationships exhaust you while calling it love? What environments reward your silence while calling it maturity? What habits make you disappear while calling it peace? That kind of self-questioning is part of mental evolution.
And part of that evolution is learning that discomfort is not always danger. Some people were taught that any challenge to the familiar means something is wrong. No, sometimes challenge is what freedom feels like before you get used to it.
That is good. Freedom can feel unfamiliar, especially to people who were raised inside a lot of control.
People often blame themselves for harms rooted in systems and relationships.
New language frees minds to recognize and question inherited harm.
Sometimes what people need most is a sentence telling the truth about their experience.
And once you have that sentence, you start upsetting people.
Clarity is disruptive to systems built on confusion and obedience.
People prefer you confused and manageable.
Speaking your lived truth can be seen as threat, especially in communities built on silence.
People defend identities built inside systems, resisting truths that challenge them.
We defend both systems and the selves shaped by them.
Challenging that self can feel like dismissing a whole life.
Timing and tone matter for truth to be heard with humanity.
And unfamiliar does not automatically mean bad. That is huge. Many people go back to harmful patterns because clarity feels lonely at first.
Let's talk about loneliness for a moment. Because I think one reason people stay inside unhealthy systems is that leaving the mindset can isolate you.
Absolutely. Once you stop performing, some people do not know what to do with you. Once you stop worshiping the same false gods, status, image, unquestioned authority, they may read you as difficult, arrogant, rebellious, or unstable. And that can hurt.
It can, especially if the people misunderstanding you are people you love. There is grief in evolving past a language your family still depends on.
There is also grief in recognizing that some of what held your community together also kept certain truths buried. That is a painful realization, because you may love your people and still see where the silence costs are too much to bear.
That is one reason this conversation matters so much to me, because I think a lot of people have started questioning things privately, but have not had language out loud. They feel the tension, but they do not know how to say it. They sense that something about life has been overstructured, overcontrolled, underfelt, underquestioned, but they do not know how to frame it.
Then let me frame part of it. A lot of us were trained to survive systems we should have been trained to redesign.
That is strong.
Very strong. And the redesign begins with thought. People underestimate how political and powerful thought is. Independent thought, curious thought, thought that is not just reaction but examination.
Which brings us full circle to the original spark. Early humans looking at the unknown, trying to make meaning, trying to explain what they saw in the sky, in storms, in cycles. There is something humble in that, something human. But somewhere along the line, meaning stopped being shared wonder and became centralized interpretation. Somebody got to tell everybody else what everything meant.
And once that happened, power got a microphone. That is when mystery can become management.
Yes, but it is also when responsibility grows. Because now that we know meaning can be manipulated, we cannot stay passive. We have to study. We have to ask. We have to compare what we were taught with what produces actual dignity.
That is a major point. Truth should not fear investigation. If a belief system collapses under honest questioning, maybe what collapses is not truth but control.
If a belief system collapses under honest questioning, maybe what collapses is not truth but control.
That right, because too many people panic when questions show up. But questions are not disrespect by default. Sometimes questions are the soul trying to breathe.
I have a question. What have people been taught to confuse with the heaven?
Comfort, status, delayed reward, compliance, and endurance are mistaken for peace.
Relief from pain, often imagined as heaven.
Distance from responsibility, avoiding the hard work of truth.
Heaven can be the missing safety, love, dignity, and freedom people were denied here.
Imagine if people demanded dignity now, not later.
That requires overcoming deep fears about peace, boundaries, and questioning.
Many police themselves for systems that never truly loved them.
You can spend decades policing yourself for a system that never loved you properly.
That realization often brings anger, honest, grief-filled anger.
Anger opens doors but cannot build homes.
True.
What changes in community if we build heaven beside us?
Stop protecting image over people, churches, families, workplaces. Must prioritize humanity.
Real listening, not just waiting to reply.
And sometimes questions are the mind trying to return to itself.
Education, emotional, historical, language, and so people have words to understand experience.
Without humane language, talking across difference becomes attack or defense.
Inquiry threatens rigid systems because it opens alternative explanations.
Sometimes the most sensitive person carries the truest signal.
Sensitivity can be perception refusing numbness.
Building heaven beside us means more dignity, truth, and emotional safety now.
We need clear standards for family, leadership, and community because some patterns have had enough grace.
And grace for those waking up late, moving clumsily at first.
Not everyone arrives at clarity at the same time.
But growth must be visible in behavior, not just vocabulary.
Learning new words without changing habits is not enough.
What does building heaven beside us look like practically?
Homes where children can ask why without fear, and adults apologize when wrong.
Leadership with humane communication, fair treatment, and accountability upward and downward.
Communities that listen, mentor consistently, and teach emotional literacy.
Individuals learning to notice what they were taught to call normal with honesty, not shame.
Discomfort can be the start of mental evolution, not danger.
Freedom can feel unfamiliar, especially when raised in control.
Unfamiliar doesn't mean bad. Loneliness can cause people to return to harmful patterns.
Do not confuse endurance with peace, and do not call silence health just because it looks orderly.
There is grief in evolving past family languages of control.
And grief in seeing how silence protected people, but also buried truths.
Redesign begins with independent, curious thought.
Before we close, I want each of you to leave the listener with one sentence. What do you want them to carry from this conversation?
Love people enough to tell truth about hurt with enough humanity for rebuilding.
What you inherited deserves examination, not automatic loyalty.
If heaven means dignity, truth, peace, and room to be human, start living that now.
This was a deep one.
It had to be.
Because people are hungry for real conversation.
We hope this gave you not final answers, but deeper questions about where you look for peace and truth, what you inherited, and how to build more dignity beside you now.
Thank you for tuning in to Constructive Talks and We Speak Forward. Click that link to be notified about these amazing real conversations and keep telling your peaceful truth. Keep growing through mental evolution and keep making room for your more honest human future.